TGIF, happy Friday, and welcome to the Urban Domestic Diva, my weekly video installment. And today is a somewhat big project, and it was a little bit of an adventure. You're going to go on a baking adventure with me. Years ago, I made Springerle cookies, which you may have seen in kind of traditional international cookbooks. And they're little squares, and they have they're molded with really fun designs, and these are really simple. This is from a rolling pin from Germany, but really simple designs. They have grapes, squirrels with a nut, candles, flowers, butterflies, bees, birds, those kinds of things. And they can get really ornate. And a few years ago, I tried this with a very American pedestrian kind of recipe, and it was a total disaster, complete disaster. The dough was sticking to the rolling pin, it was too soft, but the flavors were there, and I was always really intrigued to figure out how to really make these. And so I've done a lot of research, and I found this really old cookbook in an antique shop. It was like $1. And in this cookbook was a very traditional recipe for Springerle cookies. So I am making an attempt. You're going to follow me through this little adventure while we make them using baking powder versus hartshorn. Hartshorn is a baker's baking powder. It's a little different, and it's very hard to find, but it was what was traditionally used for these. When you use hartshorn, they're a lot thicker, they rise more, and they're more of a soft cake-like center, and they're even a little lighter. The Springerle cookies usually have a very white, light face to them, and they're baked very slowly, we're going to find out, and they also sit overnight. So this is a 3-day process according to this recipe, and I cross-checked it with another German cookbook that we had that I completely forgot I had from an Old Time Life collection that we found in another antique shop. Can you tell that we collect cookbooks? We do. So I had 2 really old German recipes, and they pretty much follow the same process. It takes 3 days. No joke. So it was no wonder the original recipe that I tried years ago didn't work. So join me on this adventure as we learn how to make these really cool traditional cookies from Germany. So we're going to work in 3 phases. 1, the dough. You make the dough, you let it sit overnight. The dough is comprised of 4 eggs that I've had sitting at room temperature for, honestly, since this morning, and it's about 1 in the afternoon. There's 2 teaspoons of fresh grated lemon zest. And then here, sifted twice, is 4 cups of all-purpose flour, 1 teaspoon of baking powder, and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And I believe from these 2 old recipes that I've read, it's sifted twice because they really want that baking powder and that leavening to be evenly distributed throughout this dough. The leavening is really key in these cookies to get the rise out of them, and also to get the molding, the design in the actual cookie to show up and spring up, which is what Springerle mean, to spring up. So leavening is important. All right, so I've sifted this twice. I'm going to go to the stand mixer and we'll get this going. We also need 2 cups of granulated sugar. Nearby, when we get rolling tomorrow, we're going to need also confectioner's sugar and butter and anise seeds, but we'll get to that tomorrow because this is a 3-step process. So we have our 4 eggs. They were at room temperature, and we're going to whip them. We're going to use the whisk for the first part of this recipe. Once we get to the flour, we're going to switch to the paddle. We're going to whip this till it's really thick and lemony in color, about 5 minutes. So we're going to get this going. So it's been 5 minutes, and you can see how the batter There's a nice thick ribbon. When you pull up the whisk, it's very light. It's very, very thick. So now we're going to start gradually adding our sugar. So this is 2 cups of sugar, and we're going to add a few tablespoons at a time, beating well after each addition. So these old recipes tell me this could take up to 10 minutes. So that's about 3 tablespoons of sugar. I'm going to whip it up for, I'm going to whip it up for like a couple minutes and then keep adding. Stopping, adding, whipping. About halfway through the sugar, it's starting to get kind of shiny and thick. You want to scrape the sides just to make sure the sugar's getting incorporated. You can see it's almost looking meringue-y. This is definitely not the recipe that I did years ago. That turned out to be a hot mess. I am optimistic this is going to turn out. Okay, so continue gradually adding the rest of your sugar. So I've added my 2 teaspoons of lemon zest, and one of my old German cookbooks suggests a drop or 2 of vanilla, so I'm just going to do a little splash. I doubt the very, very old traditional recipe had either one of these. You know, citrus is coming from the Mediterranean, vanilla is coming from the tropics. So these were probably later additions, but you know what? We're going to add it because we're also using baking powder instead of hartshorn, so we're going to go with that. Now at this point, we're going to take the whisk off. Once we've scraped all that goodness off, we're going to scrape the sides. Scrape the bottom. Make sure everything is incorporated. We're going to put a paddle attachment on. Okay, we're going to go gradually again and incorporate as much as we can with the paddle. And if it gets too cumbersome, we're just going to have to knead it in or use a wooden spoon. So let's see how much we can get. Let's go on low. Well, it's all incorporated and it's pretty stiff. So we were able to get all the flour in with the paddle, just go real slow. And it's pretty dense, it's pretty sticky. We're going to divide it into 3. That's the next step. If your hands are getting too sticky, just flour them. All right, I decided to roll out my Silpat, flour it. Just give this a good kind of once over with my hands. The recipes don't say this, but my baking senses are telling me to. Okay, so this is your dough. I'm gonna divide it into 3. Try to be as even as possible. And then one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to shape them already into kind of some flat rectangles. So the rolling will go easier. Okay, I'm going to set this one aside and I'm going to do the same for the other 2. Okay, this concludes phase 1, our dough. So you can see I've got things divided up in 3, sort of by hand flattened things out. I'm going to set it on kind of a small baking sheet. I'm also taking my Springerle rolling pin. And if you have forms, grab your forms. We want to chill those too. So this is going to chill overnight, roughly 10, 12, 24 hours. Nice and cold. Even your forms, okay? So we'll meet back tomorrow, same bat time, same bat channel for phase 2. All right, it's been 24 hours, so it's the next day, and I still have the dough in the fridge. I just want to prep my baking sheets. So I have 2 of these, and I've lined them with tin foil, because what you're going to want to do is take some butter, about a tablespoon per sheet. So this is just under a tablespoon, but you just want to coat with butter. Now this is really the key ingredient to these cookies, and that is anise. So even in my old cookbook, in one of them, they're just called anise molded cookies, and then underneath it, Springerle. So this is really the key ingredient, and they're anise seeds, where anise extract comes from, also a key ingredient in like Sambuca, has a licorice kind of flavor. Now, the old traditional recipes, you sprinkle these seeds on the baking sheet that you've just buttered. I just think for today's palette, I'm gonna crush them up a little bit to just make them finer. So I'm gonna take about a tablespoon per sheet. It's a little under. And I'm just going to crush it in a mortar and pestle. The reason why I went a little under is because I'm crushing it and I'm making the spice stronger, so I won't need to use as much. Ah, you can smell that. Too bad smell-o-vision has not come to YouTube. So you just kind of want to grind it up a little bit. I'm going to take my baking sheet and I'm just going to sprinkle directly and try to be as even as possible so you don't have any weird clumps anywhere. Some recipes have you adding anise extract directly into the dough, and that can work too if this weirds you out. This is just a very traditional way of doing things, and I'm trying to be as true as possible. Okay, so that's one sheet. I'm going to crush another batch and do it to the second baking sheet. Okay, now I'm ready to get my dough going. So there's a little bit of some difference of opinion as far as what to use to roll things in. The one recipe I have has us rolling on top of powdered sugar and coating our rolling pin with the molds with powdered sugar. My guess is this will add a nice crust to the cookie that is kind of its claim to fame. But I am skeptical. So there's also another school of thought where you just use flour. We're gonna try confectioner sugar first. And as I said, you guys are on an adventure with me as we figure out this labor-intensive yet amazing cookie. So we're gonna give this a shot. I've coated, as you can see, my surface with powdered sugar. And I was using a kind of the end of my pastry brush. And I'm gonna use this to also help coat my rolling pin, which I'm going to keep in the fridge until I need to use it. I'm going to get my dough now. Okay, so this is one of our slabs of dough, and we're aiming for an 8-inch by 5-inch. We're actually already at 5, so we just need to elongate this. So we'll sprinkle some more powdered sugar. And we're going to get rolling. So we are at about 8 inches by 5. And I have to say, it's very, very cold, as it should be, and it feels a little dry, and I'm a little concerned. So I think I'm going to just let it sit out for a few minutes. Hit it with the rolling pin one more time and then see if we can get our forms going. We're looking for about, I don't know, 3/8 of an inch thick. You kind of need to guess with your form. While I have this sitting, I'm just checking for width, which seems to be good. See, I just want it a little bit more even. I don't know, guys. We'll see what happens. Okay, the next thing, because we don't want things to stick, is now I'm using the rolling pin, but you might have some really intricate, pretty forms. You know, you can find them in antique stores. A lot of these get handed down from generation to generation in a family. But, so they can get really, really intricate. So you have to be sure that things don't stick. All right, this one I'm gonna really press. Yeah, that went way better. Especially here where I really got above it. So you really have to press, you guys. So do the same thing. Cut your extra ugly ones. Now I used a knife to cut them out. And don't be concerned if the indentations are a little light. You know, we'll do better next time. But as they sit overnight, the designs become more pronounced. So with these, and you can use a spatula to pull them up. I've got my waiting baking sheet here. And I'm just going to set them right on the butter and the anise. So I had a little water to reconstitute this last batch of just remnants. I think that when you take this dough and you put it in the fridge overnight, you're pretty much taking the stickiness out and drying it out, which allows the roller with all the intricacies to just kind of go through. But reconstituting the remnants into a workable piece of dough again is tricky. And so I had to wet my fingers, add some water, just a little bit as I went until I could reshape it into a rough rectangle again. And it has become a little stickier. So instead of the powdered sugar on this one, I am going to use some flour on the bottom. And hope that I can get this dough into a situation where I can get a handful more, because it's a lot of dough. I don't want it to go to waste. All right, not too bad. We got a handful more. So here they are, everybody, in their glory. So they have to sit like that overnight, 24 hours. They're going to dry out. The designs are going to get more pronounced, and then we're going to bake them low and slow. So put them somewhere where you can keep them uncovered, where they're not going to be disturbed, or cat hair is not going to get on them, or dust, or kids aren't going to knock them over. So figure out a spot where they can just sit quietly through the night until tomorrow. And that's where we'll reconnect. All right, they've been sitting overnight and then some. And you can see they've really dried out considerably. They're pretty stiff, but there is an area of moisture down here. And from what I understand and the research I've done, that's what you're looking for. So now it's time to bake these off. Some discrepancies as far as how hot the oven is supposed to be. I've got a range of like 250 to 325. I think the bigger the shape of the cookie should probably be hotter. I'm going to go with 300, and I'm going to time it at 20 minutes. Seems like the hotter the oven, the shorter the time, obviously. So we'll give this a try. We're looking for just ever so slightly golden edges. These are very, very pale cookies, and if you use the hartshorn, evidently it makes them even more lighter and brighter on top. But we don't want them brown. We want them just ever so slightly golden on the edges and on the bottom. So we bake them right in these pans. We'll check them in the oven at about 20 minutes. Okay, let's take a look at these. It's been, I switched them after 10 minutes, so it's been 10, and then I checked the edges, and we're just starting to get a little bit of brown. So I think these are done. They've risen a little, nothing too crazy. But yeah, I think they're done. So that was about 23 minutes, all said and done. So that concludes our Springerle adventure, and I think they worked this time. And they're actually really good. So, actually, like, I'm surprised, right? I kind of was. I mean, having cookies sit out overnight on butter was a little weird. But my husband and I ate one this morning after we pulled them out, and they're really, really good. We let them kind of set up on the sheets. And the key here is that you store them in between waxed paper in a tin. And actually, these get better with age, according to the recipe. In fact, the recipe that I have said don't even eat these for another 2 to 3 weeks. But these are a Christmas cookie, and Christmas is like, what, a week and a half away. So we will be eating these. We had them this morning. They're really yummy. If you like anise, and lemon, it's a delicious cookie. Crispy, crunchy on the outside. I would be curious if I could find some hartshorn to do this again and see the difference with how high they can rise in the oven and the texture at the center, because they are very firm. They'd be great with a nice cup of coffee to dunk in. So, but they also get better with age. I'm also reading that the anise flavor gets stronger with age as well. So store them and enjoy them throughout January. So that's it with Fridays with Flora. Thank you so much for joining me in this adventure. And we'll see if I can get another Fridays with Flora up next week before Christmas. We'll see. But definitely the week between Christmas and New Year's, we will be off. So enjoy the rest of the holiday season. Get your shopping done. And please subscribe to the channel. You can keep up on all the fun stuff that we do here. So, enjoy the Friday.